My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review of Wong's Gone Wong, and this will be a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, then come back and watch my review, because I will be going in depth. Or you don't really have to. It's not like it's a movie filled with unpredictability, with twists and turns. No, it plays out exactly how you'd expect it to, so you can still watch my review if you'd like. This is a movie that came out in October of 2021, and nobody saw it, and nobody talked about it, and it just kind of came and went. But I heard some decent things about it, so I thought I'd give it a try. And I will say that before I get talking about the movie, I find the release of this movie to be very odd because Disney bought Fox, and Fox's animation studio was Blue Sky Productions. Disney shut down Blue Sky Productions. That's the studio that made Ice Age and Warbots and Rio and Horton Hills Who. And then they start a new animation branch in which this is the first movie they released. And I just think it's weird how they already had an animation studio, but they didn't release this movie under it. Instead, they shut down the old animation studio. I don't know if what I'm saying makes any sense, but the way that they went about it makes zero sense to me. But anyways, this was not a good movie at all. But let's begin with what I did like, and I'm going to go ahead and list a positive that I don't have very often, and it's Zach Galifianakis. I'm typically not a fan of him. I liked him in the first Hangover. I think he's hilarious in Between Two Ferns. But just about everything else, I found him to be annoying and unlikable. I just rewatched Lego Batman the other day. I don't really care for that movie, if I'm being honest. And he's awful in that movie. Like, I think his voice performance is so bad in that movie. So I was really pleasantly surprised by just how good he does here. He managed to give this Warbot a unique personality, and I think he hits the comedic beats. Every single joke that lands in this movie comes specifically from his character. And I actually liked him as a character, so I thought he did a good job in this movie. Then you've also got the dad of the main character, who, as soon as I saw him, he just looked like the dad from Coraline to me, so I just imagined John Hodgman's voice, but it's actually Ed Helms' voice. And he does a good job. It's a different kind of role for him, but I think he did a good job with it. And that is unfortunately where my positives end. I do think the rest of the cast was really bad, including the main voice actor, Jack Dylan Glazer. I think he was miscast. I liked him in Shazam, I liked him in Luca, but here I just don't think his voice matched the character, and I just felt like he was trying too hard, and just something about his performance really didn't work for me. Then we've got Justice Smith, who is an actor that I've never liked in anything ever. I think he's awful in every movie he appears in, and that's the case here. Just with his voice performance, you just get reminded of how bland and dull this guy is as an actor. Like, he is where charisma goes to die. Then you've got Olivia Colman, who I love for the most part as an actress, but I'm going to be honest, I didn't hear Olivia Colman's voice in her character. Like, I guess you can say she did a good job though, but it was just kind of a nothing voice performance. In fact, didn't she voice another character in Mitchell's vs. the Machines? Because I'm pretty sure she did, and if that's the case, then that's weird because this movie and Mitchell's vs. the Machines do have a lot of similarities. Like, when this movie begins, the very first scene, I'm just like, didn't I just see something exactly like this in Mitchell's vs. the Machines? And yes, that's the case. Now, that said, this movie was in production before that movie came out, so it's just kind of a case of unfortunate timing. And maybe that's why they just dumped this movie like the way they did. Not just Mitchell's though, this movie also reminded me of Big Hero 6. I mean, you've got a story of a boy and his warbot, and the design of the warbot, like, Baymax looks like a bigger, poofy warbot, and this warbot looks like if Baymax was shrunk down into a smaller warbot. And that's what this Warbot looks like. So it just reminded me of that. And I'm also going to compare this movie to a completely random movie. But this movie has a very similar plot to the 2019 remake of Child's Play. The plot of these Warbots who are meant to be friends to kids. And one gets programmed wrong. So then he ends up being different than every other version of the toy. Like, I know it's a bit of a stretch, and obviously there's more blood and guts in Child's Play, but it's still very similar story-wise. Just replace the killer robot doll with and not kill a robot doll, and you've pretty much got yourself the same story. But this movie does take lots of familiar plot beats. There's nothing about this movie that feels fresh or new. It just feels like a rehash of the same formula. I never think it hits those emotional beats, because I was never emotionally invested in the relationship between the boy and the robot. Like, you watch a movie like How to Train Your Dragon, and you don't just care for Hiccup, you don't just care for Toothless, but you care about their friendship together. And you get none of that here. And this movie is an hour and 53 minutes long, and it's way too long. In fact, it makes the entire pacing and the structure of this movie to be completely off, because the movie's going about it just fine. It's hitting all those beats you expect it to hit. But then there's a point where, like, all these other robots go rogue and they start forming this giant robot thing when they come together, and then the main character gets in trouble, and that's typically where you get the main character hitting rock bottom. It always happens just before the last act of the movie. But not here. That happens just past the halfway mark. So in order to stretch out the movie for way longer than it should have been, they add on this entire plot of where he hides out in the forest, and it just destroys any sense of pacing this movie had. It just adds unnecessary lengths to this movie. You could have cut it entirely and lose nothing. Because what's even happening when he's in the forest? Well, he's just hanging out with the robot. Well, that's the entire movie, so what specifically about him in the forest? Well, we find out why he hates the dark, but you could have done that in a different scene. You've got the robot saving him, but that's not really an element that's needed. So you've got this chunk of the movie that takes place in the forest that destroys the pacing, and it just ruins any bit of momentum the movie had up until that point. So now the entire movie as a whole feels completely off on a structural level, because they were ramping up for the last act just past the halfway mark, and you're still a half hour away from the last act. It's just bad writing. Like, the boy was getting chased through town. Just have him get caught, they reboot the robot, and then you can go into the last act from there. It's easy. But they didn't do that. Also, the last act doesn't work on any level because there's just one small detail that just destroys everything. So Justice Smith's character is this guy who created these robots to be friends with kids, and he seems kind of touched and motivated by Ron and Bonnie's friendships throughout the movie. So then when he finally catches up to them and he gets the robot, he's the one that reboots it. He doesn't have an ounce of character besides the fact that he likes the friendship between the two of them. So the fact that he would be the one to reboot the robot was the dumbest decision they could have made. Like, you had Steve Jobs right there. Like, it would have made perfect sense for Steve Jobs to take the robot and reboot it, and the other guy have a problem with that, so he's willing to help them out. Like, it's such a small detail, such a small decision, but it makes all the difference, because what you got now lacks any bit of consistency in the characters, and it's just bad writing. And I really didn't like the ending. Now, I like the message that you should be friends with real people and how being online isn't good for you, which today's society is just completely doomed because of social media, but that's a different rant for a different time. Just talk about the movie, Gavin. But it also ends on this note where it tries to be the best of two worlds, and it just ends up falling short. So basically, Juan's just like, hey, I'm different, so why don't you make every robot different like me? And that doesn't work for me. And I'm gonna quote Syndrome from The Incredibles. If everyone's special, then nobody is. What made Juan stand out as a character is the fact that he was different from everyone else. And if everyone's got a robot that's different from everyone else, well, now everyone's got the same kind of robot. So it doesn't work on that level. On top of that, everyone seemed perfectly happy with their normal, boring versions of their robot at the beginning. So at the end, when we see everyone in the playground playing with their new robot so happy, it's just like, well, this just seems like the exact same scene at the beginning. It doesn't seem like there's any change there. And then another part of the ending is that he has this group of friends now, but every single one of these supporting characters is completely underdeveloped, and this entire aspect is underplayed the entire movie. So this doesn't feel like a nice, satisfying ending because there's no build up to it. It just feels like it comes out of nowhere. And if the message is that you should have real friends, which is a good message to have, then instead of trying to make every bot be different, why not just make every bot blow up? And now people are forced to be friends with each other again. Like, that would have been a much better ending if you ask me. So it just seems like it doesn't know which ending it wants to go with, and it's just in this place in the middle where it's definitely not satisfying on either end. And I will mention that I hated the music in this movie. Now, I like Henry Jackman as a composer. I love his music in Uncharted 4. I love his music in Kingsman: The Secret Service. He's done some great scores, but the music here was far too upbeat that it just sounded really artificial. There was a Star Wars reference in this movie, which I get there were Star Wars references in other movies in the past, like Back to the Future, which is one of my favorite movies. But just because Disney owns Fox now, a part of my brain's just like, did Disney put that in there? Did they do that? Because they did it with Free Guy. And if we get a Star Wars reference in every movie now, I'm not going to be happy. And also, I forget who voiced the villain, but I don't think he did a good job. The villain isn't subtle whatsoever, and I'm okay with that. It's a cartoon. The villain's usually over the top and cartoony. I just wish they leaned into that a bit more. And if you had someone like Hugh Grant or Hugh Laurie who could just up the guy's personality, I think the villain would have been much better. But this is a movie that I didn't really enjoy. Zach Galifianakis gives honestly his best performance in years. It does have some funny moments, but the movie as a whole just doesn't work. I think the story is just nothing new. The pacing and the structure of the movie is completely off. It's way too long, and the script is just bad. So I'm going to go ahead and give Wong's Gone Wong a 3.5 out of 10. Okay, have you seen Wong's Gone Wong? What did you think about it? Did you think it gone wrong? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin out.